So what's up, guys? So my last day at Bridgewater Associates was last Friday, two days ago. I just want to talk a little bit about my experience, why I joined, and what I liked about it. You know, it's an interesting culture. For those of you who don't know, it's one of the largest hedge funds in the world, founded by Ray Dalio, and it's just a very unique company. And so I figured that'd make for an interesting video. So let's do it. So as I said, my last day was 2 days ago. I've been there for about 2 years. Well, let me back up and actually say that when I first moved to New York, which is about 2.5 years ago, I was still at Postmates. My team was in San Francisco, so I'd be working remote, which is not great. But I really wanted to live in New York. It's a great city. So when I came here, I was like, okay, well, what opportunities are here? What can I do that's actually in New York? So I literally Googled best hedge funds to work for. Now, I should say that I had offers maybe 5 years ago from D.E. Shaw and Two Sigma to also well-known hedge funds. I ended up not taking those, but I was always kind of interested in finance and in the hedge fund world and what I could do there. When I got here, I Googled, like I said, world's biggest hedge fund or something along these lines, or best place. Anyway, Bridgewater came up at the top. I thought it was interesting. And so I applied, just sent in my resume, and they got back to me. I ended up interviewing, and while I was still at Postmates. Well, let me just back up and say that this video is not intended to talk about anything private or proprietary, confidential at Bridgewater. They take security very seriously. I take it seriously, but I want to reflect on things that are already in public domain and somewhat knowable about the culture and about what it's like to work there. So with that out of the way, as I said, I joined originally as kind of an architect in IC. I did end up managing people. I ended up responsible for a relatively large team in the company. Let me talk about what drew me to it. As I mentioned, they have a very unique culture. They pride themselves on radical transparency. You haven't read the book Principles. It's a good book, again, written by Ray Dalio. That really drew me to the company. Overall, most of the years that I've been working in the field of technology, I never really was subjected to a lot of just good feedback from my peers and from people I worked with. You get peer reviews and things like that every quarter, or let's say half a year, something along those lines. But it's hard to really get honest, direct feedback in the moment when people can tell you how they really feel and what they really think, how they perceive you. Sometimes people are just afraid to call you out. You're afraid to call other people out. You don't want to hurt people's feelings. You want to make sure that you play nice with others. Bridgewater kind of threads the needle where it allows you to be open and honest and direct, and that doesn't mean to be an asshole or anything like that, but to be direct with your peers. And I thought that was really appealing, and I figured out, okay, well, if I can go there and live in an environment like that, I can maybe learn a thing or two. I can learn about being open and honest and receiving feedback and being able to take these things in stride without taking it personally. And that was something that I thought would be kind of a really interesting, good skill to have, and then also, again, just to learn about myself and what I'm like through the eyes of others. And I got just that. It's publicly known that Bridgewater, for example, has tools internally. It's called the dot collector, where you can log at any point in time, essentially give feedback to your peers in a public way. We all have our own profile internally, which is the dots that we receive from others, which is just a long history of dots through time. Going back to when you started at Bridgewater. And so those dots can be positive or negative. They can be along the lines of you're unreliable or here's why, or didn't find you to be organized, or you didn't get in sync with others, and in basically calling out the principles that maybe you violated. But then on the flip side, of course, you get a lot of positive feedback as well, which is, I thought that was really good what you did. I thought you displayed empathy. I thought you had composure. I thought you have good code throughput. These sorts of structured things that can also add context to these things, and that's incredibly useful because through time, if people are doing that, it starts to form a picture of who you are. For me, speaking personally, when I look across the board of all of my dots, it's that sometimes I was not as organized as I could have been. Let's say, I didn't show, let's say, composure in a specific situation when something didn't go right. And those are things that are hard to swallow. And usually there's small things. A lot of times it's like you just have a moment or relapse, or you do something, or you don't even realize you should have gone and talked to these people before you did something. And then other people call it out. That's hard to receive. I remember when I got my first dot, that was negative is because I remember I checked in some code and it broke something that, downstream in some QA process, and the QA person logged that I don't know what it was. It probably was something along the lines of like something technical around code quality or who knows, something like that. Anyway, just seeing that negative feedback, I was like, what is going on? And seeing that on my profile, I was just taken back. And so I wanted to fight it. That was my initial reaction was, hey, I'm gonna go and fight this. And so I booked a meeting with that person, called him into the room, I'm like, hey, what is this about? Why did you give this to me? I don't think it's fair, that kind of thing. And he was like, well, it's just a perception. It's not a critique on you. It's what I felt in the moment. It's what I saw. And basically, he said, don't take it personally. And that was kind of an aha moment where I'm like, why am I getting bent out of shape about this? There's truth to it. It was his perception. In fact, a lot of times when you get these negative dots, these negative critiques, it's a gift. Someone really is giving you a gift. They're not letting it go. When someone calls you out on something, they could be right or wrong. It doesn't matter. That's the perception. If everyone is showing integrity and they actually do care and everyone's playing by the same rules, these really are good things to know about yourself, right? It gives you a moment to step back and reflect and pause and learn about yourself. Now, of course, it's not for everybody, and Bridgewater says that, 20% of people maybe just don't want to live in that kind of environment. But I found it incredibly useful and interesting, and probably one of the things that helped me to learn a lot about myself over the last 2 years and what I'm like. And also correct things and to just be better about certain things. One example is that I found that I can, in a situation or a meeting, I can talk about things, I can talk about solutions, I can talk quickly about here's what we should do and here's why and here's what I think, but I don't always step back and talk about, well, how did I get to that point? With this kind of culture, it leads to a lot of transparency, right? When we do reviews of each other, let's say on some cadence, those are all public. Everyone can see it. You put your name to everything, and you're expected to give exactly your feeling about that person, positive and negative. That's hard, especially when you receive a whole bunch of good and bad and negative and whatnot from others. It can be difficult for some, and I've seen some people get pretty beat up about it, but a lot of people are very resilient, and they take it in stride. And it was amazing to see those individuals just take things in stride and learn from it and want to do better. By and large, for me, it was a lot of the experience was positive. When someone says really good things like, that you help them or you mentored them or whatnot, it can really push you to just keep doing better and to realize that you actually are making a difference in people's lives and their work and helping others out. So that's really great. And also, because things are so transparent, everything is out there in the open, it doesn't make much space for politics, which is awesome. There's very little gossip. I experienced actually almost none of that. In fact, we kind of all have these internal rules, or we have these principles where you don't talk about others without them in the room, or if you do, you be sure to you go tell them that you talked about them and here's what you said, right? Like there's none of that. If I'm talking with someone and I'm like, hey, this person kind of screwed up here, didn't do this, I will say, well, I've already told this person that, so I'm not telling you anything, or I will make sure the video is recorded and maybe send that video to them. And by the way, also, yes, at Bridgewater, it's a good thing to be able to record videos of meetings and things like that. Again, it's just for information sharing and so that we're all on the same page. And so yeah, having a politic-free, gossip-free, very little toxic behavior, anything like that was a breath of fresh air. I mean, I loved that. A lot of things at Bridgewater come back to the principles, right? The principles of why we do things, the principles of how to treat certain situations. If you have principled thinking, you can tie situations back to that principle to kind of inform and kind of give you a sense of how to deal with that situation. And that's just pervasive throughout the culture. And that's something that I'll take with me into my next role. And that brings me to why did I leave Bridgewater? A couple things. One was initially the commute was rough. I would commute up to Connecticut. They were based up there in the city. That's about an hour and a half each way. It's a reverse commute. I did it for about a year and a half, or a year or so until COVID hit. Then I worked remotely, of course, for a while. I don't know what the future's going to hold. Maybe Bridgewater would be more remote. I know that people aren't going back into the office anytime soon, so I could have continued to do it. But still, in the future, I think it'd be really hard for me to do that commute, and I'm just not ready to move to Connecticut. That's one thing. The other thing is, again, I've learned a lot at Bridgewater. It's been a great experience. another opportunity did come along that I'm excited about. I'll stay at companies 2 to 5 years, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, and it all depends on what that company has to offer and the types of problems that I'm solving. And again, there's still more to do at Bridgewater, of course, there always is. It just was that time where an opportunity came along and I'm ready to go on for the next challenge and take what I've learned at Bridgewater and apply it there. So that's basically it. And then finally, the other thing about Bridgewater, because it's so transparent, we're all like kind of in it together, you can really form great relationships. And I made some really amazing friendships at Bridgewater, meaningful relationships that I'll take with the rest of my life with some people. And I've made friends along the way at different jobs, people I still talk to, of course, and very regularly, but I think Bridgewater was a place where you really meet a lot of people that you come to care about. And they made me feel that way, and I hope I made them feel the same way too. I think it was a really unique and good experience about Bridgewater, was the ability to form meaningful relationships with people in such an environment like that. So that was really cool. I think it's a great company in summary. It was definitely one of the most unique companies I've worked at. I'm very grateful to have been given that opportunity. The people that I worked with were awesome. Had some really great relationships. It was bittersweet, just like leaving a job is, but I'm excited about the next opportunity, and hopefully this is interesting to you. If you ask me would I recommend working at Bridgewater, yes I would, of course. If that sounds unique and interesting to you, there's a lot of challenges and it's just a great company to work for. On to the next journey for me then. It helps if you, of course, like the video, comment, or subscribe. I'll do more videos like this, maybe on other companies, also to stay up to date on where I end up going and what I'm doing next. And of course, I'd love to hear from you.